This is Mac OS Ken.
Mr. Mohan pens a note. Apple gets all up in Patreon's business. And LG's hitting Apple up for some qualos. It is Tuesday, the 13th of August, 2024. I'm Ken Ray, and this is news from Mac OS Ken. Brought to you by yours truly and supported by people like you, patrons through Patreon. Find out more and add your support at patreon.com/MacOSKen. An Apple watching financial analyst has responded to last week's DMA compliance changes. The short take? They're fine, according to BofA analyst Wamsi Mohan. I told you last week of Apple announcing changes to App Store external linking in the European Union that the company says will give developers more freedom to direct customers to non-App Store purchase options and sales. I also told you of complaints about the changes from Spotify and Epic Games, with the two saying Apple's latest rules are confusing and not in line with EU intentions behind the Digital Markets Act and probably spread syphilis. Okay, I made up that last part. Whether he disagrees with the Apple detractors or just thinks the most valuable company on the planet can probably muddle through, Seeking Alpha had Mr. Mohan issuing a note Monday reacting to the new rules. Quoting his note, the major change Apple has made is the StoreKit external purchase link entitlement, which allows developers to communicate and promote offers in the app regarding digital goods and services available for purchase in a distribution channel of the developer's choice. The analyst goes on to say Apple estimates that less than 1% of developers would pay a core technology fee. However, the most popular app developers have downloads that cumulatively could run into the billions and could provide a substantial offset to the lowered App Store take rates. Wow, that is really not going to help Apple in any argument against Spotify and Epic with the EU. Then again, it's not Mohan's job to help Apple. His job is to assess it, and he has. BofA has a buy rating on Apple shares. Mr. Mohan's price target on the shares is $256. As long as we're talking about payments and App Store and such, interesting news from Patreon on Monday. While Patreon has been a big part of this show's support for years, thank you, Patreon supporters. Everybody else, patreon.com/MacOSKen. While Patreon has been a big part of this show for years, I wasn't really aware that people could sign up as supporters through the Patreon app. Witness the fact that I keep saying patreon.com/MacOSKen, not sign up through the Patreon app. Anyway, you can sign up to support through the Patreon app, though pretty soon that is going to cost somebody more money. According to an email sent yesterday to people supported through Patreon, those would be the creators, people like, me. Apple is requiring that Patreon use their in-app purchasing system to remove all other billing systems from the Patreon iOS app by November of 2024. This means that starting in November, new memberships purchased in the iOS app will be subject to Apple's 30% App Store fee. I gotta say, I love when the capricious corporate nature of Apple affects me personally. If you're not supported through Patreon, you may not know that billing happens a couple of ways. You can either bill everybody on the first of the month or on a rolling subscription basis. But Patreon says something about Apple's thing makes first of the month billing impossible, so everybody has to go to subscription billing beginning this November. Well, it's Patreon's hope that everybody will, though they are letting creators delay that move until November of 2025. Whether the creator you're supporting makes the move or not, rates for existing supporters should not change. However, new support through the Patreon app will, at long last, incur Apple's 30% commission. Creators can either eat that cost or raise their rate for new support through the application. Now, personally, there is nothing about the uncertainty in my professional life that makes this exciting in any way. That said, as one Patreon supporter said in the back channel, I'll let the Apple Patreon thing shake itself out a bit before forming an opinion. Don't worry, I made fun of him for not being reactionary enough. I will say it's got to be annoying for people who have nothing to do with Apple whatsoever to have to see changes to their business model. My immediate thought was, I'm not sure why Patreon did this in the first place. They had to know the commission thing would happen at some point, and they should have just left the iOS app as a reader/creator application. That said, I'll try to be zen and let the Apple Patreon thing shake out a bit before forming an opinion. Because my supporters are wise. And rock stars. Big growth for smartphones in Southeast Asia, and big growth for iPhone there as well. That is the word from market tracker Canalys. The firm issued a press release Monday saying it's tracked a smartphone shipment surge of 14% in the June quarter versus the same quarter a year ago. The Southeast Asia smartphone market's recovery is being driven by a macroeconomic recovery and growing consumer sentiment, according to the firm. That's got vendors like Xiaomi and Transsion doing very well, thanks to aggressive pricing and sales incentives. And yet makers of premium phones are doing well with JP Gotrocks or his Southeast Asian equivalent. Canalys analyst Li Xuanchu is quoted in the release saying, the Southeast Asia high-end market has shown growth momentum driven by vendors' investments in innovative technologies such as AI and diversified marketing and channel efforts. When it comes to premium phones, those priced above $600 US, Samsung is said to have fared well by investing heavily in marketing and creating exclusive pop-up events to showcase its AI capabilities. Meanwhile, the analyst says Apple grew 15% versus its first half of 2023 results by expanding retail efforts in Vietnam and Malaysia, aggressive marketing, and Tim Cook's Southeast Asia tour. Additionally, offering older generation devices at heavily discounted prices helped Apple drive its presence in the region, opening revenue streams through services and strengthening its ecosystem. Great as the growth may have been, Apple is not in the Southeast Asia smartphone top 5 by Canalys count, relegated to the 6th place pile of others. Growth for the Cupertino company seems to have come at the expense of others, though. While iPhone shipments in the region are said to have been up 15%, the others category actually saw a contraction. Shipments for the whole category were down 8%, according to the firm. LG would apparently like some of Apple's money. In fairness, though, it is to recoup money of its own LG spent on Apple's behalf. Mac Rumors cites a report from The Elec saying the display maker is seeking compensation from Apple following the abrupt cancellation of the microLED Apple Watch. It seems LG sank a lot of do-re-mi into the project before Apple dropped it like it was hot. As a result of the device's cancellation, Mac Rumors says LG Display has apparently been left with substantial sunk costs, including the expense of purchasing 14 U.S. patents related to micro-LED technology from Taiwan's Ultra Display. The company now faces potential claims from its equipment partners, some of whom had also invested in the project, without formal contracts in place. Overall, the piece says LG is thought to have spent the equivalent of somewhere between tens of millions and hundreds of millions of dollars on the eventually canceled plans. No word in the piece on next steps between the two companies. Monday was another big day of downloads for developers. A few pieces from Mac Rumors had Apple seeding the 6 developer betas of iOS and iPadOS 18, along with macOS 15 Sequoia, watchOS 11, tvOS 18, and visionOS 2. But wait, there was more. Another Mac Rumors piece says Apple seeded the 2nd developer betas of iOS and iPadOS 18.1, as well as macOS 15.1, aka the ones with some semblance of Apple intelligence, to members of the developer community. Now, initially I had written that one could reasonably expect the next non-AI betas to be out today or tomorrow. Then Apple pulled a fast one or a faster than usual one and let those out Monday as well. A piece from 9 to 5 Mac midday Monday had Apple hitting with the fourth public betas of iOS and iPadOS 18, macOS 15 Sequoia, and more. Their words, not mine. Though that piece does not say, I assume the and more includes the fourth betas of watchOS 11 and tvOS 18. Apple has not been releasing public betas for Vision OS. I've said it before and I will say it again. People who want to be in on the public OS testing action can find out more at beta.apple.com. Back now to the developer side, where we find code monkeys sticking it in their ears. Another piece from 9 to 5 Mac says members of the developer program now have access to a beta of the firmware for AirPods Pro 2. Normally the kind of story I ignore. This one's got neat new features known to be on the way. Those are said by the piece to include support for nodding or shaking your head to respond to Siri, voice isolation to improve calls in noisy environments, and improvements to personalized spatial audio, especially for gaming. The piece says those features will hit the AirPods Pro 2 this fall, along with iOS 18 and its ilk. And finally today, if you want to look around someplace without having to actually go to that place and really look around, Apple Maps may be a better friend soon. Mac Rumors has word of spelunking by code diver Ryan Fay. He took to Twitter to hip folks to something he found in, oops, Apple Maps on the web. According to the report, the leaked data shows that in the U.S., look-around coverage will no longer be confined to major cities. Instead, it will expand to include major highways, smaller cities, and rural areas. Cool. I can look around where my dad grew up without the awkwardness of running into my dad. I'm kidding. It's not always awkward. In addition to filling in the U.S. gaps, the piece says it looks like new countries are set to gain look-around coverage as well. Those are said to include Belarus, Bulgaria, China, Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, Mexico, Morocco, Slovakia, Syria, and Turkey. macOS Ken, brought to you by me and supported by people like you, patrons through Patreon. Find out more and add your support at patreon.com/macOSKen. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media, online at backbeatmedia.com. You can reach me a couple of ways. Info at macosken.com or call 716-780-4080. Until next time, that is news from macOS Ken. I'm Ken Ray.
Ciao.